Caring for Kids God's Way, a biblical counseling certificate program in child advocacy developed by the American Association of Christian Counselors through Light University. Your ministry is to be a Galatians 6:2 helper. Ours is to equip you with the highest level of advanced training from the world's leading Christian counselors. 24 experts teaming up to create the most comprehensive child studies curriculum for the personal classroom. May the Lord bless your study as you begin caring for kids God's way. A licensed psychologist with an extensive background in attachment disordered children, co-author along with AACC President Tim Clinton of the book Loving Your Child Too Much, and assistant professor at Liberty University's Professional Counseling Doctoral Program. Caring for Kids God's Way presents Dr. Gary Sibcy, Emotional Coaching with Kids.
I'm Dr. Gary Sibcy, and we're going to talk today about emotion coaching kids. And want to talk a little bit about how to use emotion coaching with some of the tougher kids who have a lot of misbehavior, explosiveness, and sort of angry defiance. This model can be used with kids who don't have those features, and how to do emotion coaching just with kids who may have some behavior difficulties. But the model is really designed to address some of the tougher kids. That's what we're going to focus on today. And just to give you some overview, is this model comes out of a combination of attachment theory, which you'll see, some cognitive neuroscience, and family systems work. It's just a brief overview of a model that we've used with children over the last 10 years or so that we have found to be quite effective. And there's various versions of this in the research under collaborative problem-solving skills with kids with oppositional defiant disorder and pediatric bipolar disorder. We think it's a wonderful model and something that you can adapt to your practice and use with these kids and families, and we hope it can be a useful tool for you. Okay, we're here with Tim and Jennifer, and they're going to role play for us a typical case that I tend to see in my clinic of a child, in this case Logan, who has basically had problems with behavior, and he's had problems with his mood, where he gets really angry, he's kind of grumpy and irritable most of the time. And when he gets like this, he's pretty much uncontrollable. You can't really get him to do too much. They have a real hard time getting him, to like go to bed, to do homework. Has a hard time getting along with his siblings. And this is a fairly classic case of a child that we would call explosive, angry, and defiant. And again, these kids have not really responded very well to any of the typical behavioral stuff that parents will try and clinicians will try to help these children, from doing reward programs, to doing timeouts, to spankings, to any of those types of behavioral programs just basically have not worked. And this program is designed specifically to try to help those kids. And what I want to try to do is give you a sense of what that would look like when I'm working with parents. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to shift into what it would look like doing a situation analysis. Now, the key to doing a situation analysis is to help a parent or help parents shift from more global negative views of their child, where they tend to use things like always and never, to a very specific incident. And we want to focus on how it developed and how parents responded to the child. And what you'll see is generally that there's an escalation that goes on. And we want to track that a little bit. And then we also want to pay attention to the general feeling in the relationship. Most of the time you'll see that these kids and the parents have essentially a breakdown in what we call the secure-based system. There's no longer a sense from the child's perspective that he can trust his parents to go to them to help him get calmed down, which is the essence of an attachment secure-based system. Now, the parents don't feel that way, but in that they do feel available to the child, but what happens is that they're just overwhelmed, they're frustrated, and have developed such a negative view of the child that they essentially find themselves sort of distancing and emotionally pulling away from them. So let's hop into this interview with the parents, with Tim and Jennifer, and let's just follow this. Well, thanks for coming in, and I know you guys have been pretty frustrated with this, and as we've talked, you've tried just about everything to help Logan. And, you know, I tell parents who are in this position, I know you love your kid. I know Logan, you know, you'd do anything for him. What ends up happening, though, and most parents would agree on this, you let me know, you love him to death, but you don't like him.
Pretty much sums it up for me.
Okay.
It's been hard. It's just been really hard to deal with him lately.
And we'll talk a little bit later, is though you can really love a child and not like them. But at one level, a child reads that differently. So we're going to talk about how you can actually correct that. Simply telling them, you know, I love you, doesn't really work that well. You know, it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. And one of the reasons is because children listen more to your behavior and to your mood than they do actually what you say. But one of the things I wanted to kind of get a sense of is what one of these explosive episodes look like. Now, for you two, as you've described at this point, tend to think and feel like they come out of nowhere. Okay.
And they come,
That's true.
they come quite often.
Quite often, and they come out of nowhere. Now, one of the things I tell parents I predict ahead for them is that most of the time we'll find that these have a very, very predictable pattern. Right? So we got to teach you how to see that. But the best way to get there is just talk about a typical example, but a real life one. So you're not kind of like making an amalgamation. Okay, you're giving me a real example.
So something that really happened
Something
recently.
that really happened.
I can think of one right off the bat. The other night,
Yeah, when he was watching TV.
yeah, basically it's our bath time or shower time or get ready for bedtime, and we made a decision to go, you know, with what we felt, to hurry the thing up. It was later than we normally do this.
Yeah, we usually let them only watch TV for an hour, and then at 9 o'clock they have to go to bed. They have to get ready for bed, take their baths and go to bed.
Didn't feel like it was the best decision to, I was kind of on the side of let's just let them go on to bed, but I know you felt strongly about the cleanliness thing, the shower thing. We chose a shower.
He never wants to take a shower. He
hates
always fights me on taking his showers.
Hates it.
So one of the things is shower times not easy for him.
No.
Okay.
It's always a
not
fight.
easy for us either.
Yeah.
All right. So how did this one go? So already in one sense it's kind of chaotic, and you sort of made a decision. Let's do it now.
Right.
All right. He's watching TV.
Well, his program had just gone off,
Right.
and he kept start to watch the next one, and I said, Logan, it's time for your shower. You have to go take the shower now.
Right.
And he just went ballistic.
Well, that's when I got involved because, you know, she calls me for help, and I'm in my study. I come down, and we do this together. It's not a Lone Ranger thing for her, but at the same time, you know, I was like, why now? Why this? But, you know, and maybe he saw that in me, but I pushed on, and we started the process, and it just got ugly quick, you know.
Okay.
He ended up locking himself in his room.
All right. Now you guys use two important words. Going ballistic, okay, is one, and flipping out's another. I'd like to know what each of those mean. When you say he flips out, what did you see?
He starts to yell at me.
So you're saying, let's go, let's go,
And he
it's time
says
to go.
no, and he starts to scream at me, gets really red in the face, and gets really angry. Sometimes he will throw things.
Right.
He has the remote, he threw it across the room.
Yeah, and the remote was is a typical thing. And in the shower, grabbing of literally like, we don't even put like the shower wash containers in there. He will throw those. But so even soap, you know, what can soap do? You know, but he throws soap. He grabs the shower curtain and just from side to side until we've gone through about 2 or 3 shower curtains this year with him.
So now in this situation, he gets mad, he yells at you, he throws the remote, all right? And so that's flipping out for you.
I would, yeah. We feel
For
like
you, that's flipping out, okay? And now it's important because, you know, as parents, we sort of have labels for what our kids do, and what I try to do is help parents operationalize that, put that into real concrete terms. Flipping out means he yells, he's mad, he's throwing the flipper, the remote, okay, and he's out of control.
Yep.
You come in, and he goes ballistic. So what do you see? What's ballistic mean to you?
Well, more the whole just extremely red in the face, raising of his voice, screaming, saying things he should never say to his mother. And then whenever I try, and right or wrong as this may be, to try to physically restrain him and calm him down.
He hit him.
Oh yeah, he'll go to kicking and limbs, hands, feet, whatever it takes to get away from me, and that's when the running to the bedroom starts and the door
Lock the
slams,
door.
and here we go. It's a whole different episode, but that's to me what it represents.
Now, is he a room wrecker? When he goes in the
Yeah.
room, what's he doing there?
He'll knock his books off the shelf, throw his toys.
Right.
One time he broke his closet door. He kicked it.
So this is this sort of escalation. Boom, he can go there very quickly. And now, how did you guys handle this after the fact? Did you discipline this? Did you ground him?
I told him he was grounded. Right at that point when he started yelling at me, I told him he was grounded.
Okay. So gotta go take a shower.
And-
Time to get ready for bed. No, he starts yelling, and then you
Throws
say,
the remote, and I said, "That's it, Logan. You're grounded." And he doesn't care. It doesn't stop his behavior at all.
Now, so this is one of the things that you guys have noticed about Logan, okay? And, again, you've tried several different treatments up to this point, right? And most of those treatments have been sort of consequent-oriented. What I mean by that is when you see a behavior, you really come down hard with the consequence, which makes a lot of sense for a lot of kids. But what you're saying is with Logan, consequences tend to send him off into more of a tailspin. Is that correct?
Well, like I said, he doesn't even care that I tell him he's grounded.
Right.
Doesn't seem to faze him.
We've tried giving him a timeout. Well, that doesn't work because he won't stay in timeout. And Tim has tried spanking him. That just makes him angry.
Okay.
Angrier, it
So,
seems.
so those kind of things. Spanking.
None of it's working.
And when you ground him, and especially when you say you're grounded for a long time, that doesn't work. Now, are you the type that if you say you're grounded for a week, does that mean that now you are going to enforce that grounding for the next week?
Well, I do.
Okay.
When I say you're grounded for a week, that means no television, no going out to play. That's it. No, nothing. Sometimes Tim, will bend that rule and let him do something if he really wants to do something. But
Okay, so you guys may look at that a little bit differently.
Yeah, on occasion, I just don't see that. When nothing's changing,
Right.
why stay the course? Look for some new way to.
but he's going to know that it doesn't mean anything then.
Right. So what scares you about that is he's learning that rules don't or consequences don't mean anything.
Right. If I tell him he's grounded, but he really wants to go to the baseball game, so we're going to take him to the baseball game anyway, then he just knows he can get out of it.
And from your perspective, Tim, it's this misery's gone on long enough. Let's break out of it. Let's get something new going.
What we're doing is obviously not working.
It's not working, right?
So,
And he thinks it's just making him angrier, and that it is making him worse instead of better.
Well, let
think-
me ask you:
like
Do you
turning
feel like consequence? Don't take me wrong. It's because parents think that that's all I have, and sometimes that's all we've been taught up to this point. What you're saying is those things have not fazed him. Now, one of the things that we'll talk about is we're going to explain why that is.
So you know why that is?
Yeah,
We're
we would
going to
love to
explain
know
to you
why that is.
why that is, and why that approach, while it may work for a lot of children,
And it works for our other kids.
yeah, and that's typically the case, is where parents will see that it'll work for their other children, but not this child. Now, as you've said, and you've told me that he has been diagnosed with ADHD, which means that he has some executive skill problems, which we'll talk about what that means. There's some mood stuff here. Even that when he's not blowing up, he can be grumpy and irritable, grouchy. Not a lot of positive emotion that you see from him.
Not much.
Okay. And as you've described that there is some mood stuff in your own family, so there's a little bit of a biology to that for you folks. Now, the other thing is he doesn't like showers, and he doesn't like stuff like that.
He doesn't like baths, showers,
like
any
baths.
sort of getting clean.
Okay. Now, is he the type of child who, is very picky about what kind of clothing he wears and complains?
Yeah, he is very,
complains.
very picky about his clothes and what he wants to wear, what doesn't feel good to him.
Right. So now what we call that is just a tactile hypersensitivity. And what, most of us, if somebody touches us and rubs our hand, that can feel comforting. For kids like this, they tend to be sort of, almost contact avoidant. They don't like being hugged.
Yeah.
They don't like
No,
being
he doesn't
cuddled.
like
And
that.
it's not really
he's
that
like
they don't
that.
enjoy affection. It's just that they're so sensitive to touch, it overwhelms them.
That's true for him because our other kids really like us to come in at night and rub their back, or they like to get up in our lap, and he just won't
Nope.
do any of that.
Are there any other sensory experiences that seem to overwhelm him? that you know
Well,
of?
he seems to get really upset when Emily and Drew get noisy, or they're yelling, or they're playing really loudly or something. That seems to really get him in a grumpy mood sometimes.
So he gets in a more grumpy mood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, he'll yell and scream himself, but when they're doing it, he gets really mad. We'll sometimes go in his room and slam the door, or he yells at them. And
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's auditorily, he gets pretty overwhelmed pretty quickly.
It seems like.
And his reactions can be just like, again, rapid. They come quickly and they're loud. They're, like he just shows out and just screams and yells at his siblings. And of course, we don't stand for that. And then he'll scream and yell at us. And then here we go again, back into the bedroom, slamming the door. And we're just starting the cycle all over again.
All right. So you notice at the sort of auditory level, he's sensitive in that he can get overwhelmed with too much noise, sort of everything kind of in a cacophony, if you will. So too much noise at one time will overwhelm him. But yet he's loud himself. Now, does he like to, does he turn the TV up really loud? Does he listen to his music loudly?
He does.
Okay.
He does.
And then when he does this, does he then get really get more revved up and more hyper and start getting kind of
I
spazzy?
think
with you?
sometimes he does, yeah.
Okay.
I hadn't thought about that really, but
Right. That has been a common occurrence.
Okay.
Like when,
Yeah.
when he goes in the room and slams the door, one of the first things that happens is the music's up extremely loud
Right.
as he's pitching his fits in his room. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Now, that's a very common pattern necessarily for kids who have really dysregulated moods. And although we don't want to label him with anything at this point, but for example, something called pediatric bipolar disorder, that's a type of sensory profile where a child, on the one hand, gets overwhelmed by a certain experience, and instead of avoiding that experience, they actually crave more of it. So the more they crave, the more they get overwhelmed. Now, the adult version of that is the person who wants to do stuff all the time, do, but the more they do and overcommit to, the more overwhelmed and stressed they get.
Well,
Then
that
they
sounds
can't.
like you.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, I mean, so that's sort of potentially the biology, and you don't have to have something that's a full-blown, disorder to still have sort of those characteristics in your
Right.
biology, where it's hard to sort of say, I'm not going to do that. You get very excited about doing more and more, and then find yourself getting overwhelmed by the magnitude of it.
Staying up until 5:30 in the morning.
I know, but I just don't. So you're saying there's some relation possibly there, even with my life and his life?
Well, potentially not that you're teaching him that so much as there's a biology to it, and usually a family history of mood problems. It doesn't have to be bipolar disorder. It can also just be mood dysregulation, anxiety, worrisomeness, these kind of things. And that's important to realize because it's an issue at one level of a child's biology,
Right.
what they come into the world with. Not all kids come into the world the same way. And how well that matches and fits as parents your makeup, right? And if they fit well, then it tends to go easier, and you can look great as a parent. One of the things we tell parents, and we'll talk about this a little bit later when we have our next session, is we'll talk about the fact that you can be really good parents who have really good skill sets, and you guys have some kids who are doing really wonderfully.
We do. We
Yeah.
do.
And not all great parents have kids who do real well, okay? And sometimes it's because the skill set doesn't match the child's needs, okay? Even though you're well-intentioned, sometimes, good intentions aren't really enough. And then, the other one that's actually hard to understand is that you can see parents who don't seem to be very skilled at all, whose kids
Right.
do really
Yeah.
great.
It's true.
And
Right.
that's partly, that biologically God gifts them. There's kids out there, and there's people that we all know who really didn't come from the greatest of childhoods and didn't have the greatest of parents, but they were protected at one level, certainly at a spiritual level, but also even in terms of the genetic and biology level. Okay, so some of the ways that we think sometimes that if you just do X, Y, and Z as parent, then you always get this outcome is not always the case. So what we try to do is help parents learn how to adjust their parenting style to address their kids' specific biological needs.
So you really think that if we change how we're working with Logan that he can do better?
Absolutely. In fact, when we talk next time, I'll discuss with you some of the core cognitive deficits that we see in these kids. Talk a little bit to you about where they're rooted in the brain, okay? And we're going to talk to you, how we can turn this around in basically 3 stages. We're going to talk about we've got to repair the relationship that you have with him right now because at this point there's not a secure-based system. He's not feeling close to you, which actually dysregulates him even more, okay? And the more dysregulated he gets, okay, then the more he acts out. Right, so we got to repair that, and that's actually something we can do pretty quickly. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to teach you a way of interacting with him around these compliance issues in a way that will not only smooth them out some, okay, but it's also going to help correct some of these cognitive skill deficits, some of the biology that is not working right. Okay, and then the third thing is we're going to talk to you about how to extend it and use it in a more of a preventative way than just, in the heat of the moment.
So
Okay.
before he gets in a fit.
Right, right. See, most of the models people teach parents are what to do after the behavior occurs. Well,
Reacting to the behavior.
exactly. Which in Logan's case, if the behavior's already, if the bomb's exploding, it's too late. But we can usually help you see it before it comes and learn how to disarm it before it gets there. Now, sometimes you'll do great, and sometimes you won't do so well. But even when you don't do so well, you can use it as a repair event to go back and say, gee, let's look at this again, okay, and sort of recalibrate your efforts. And in that way, you grow closer. You're going to see actually brain development in him,
Wow.
okay, and cognitive skill growth. So that's where we'll go, and we'll come back together next time and talk about that. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Okay, so next time when we come back together, I'm going to spend some time talking to them about the 5 core cognitive skills that these kids struggle with, and then we're going to talk about how to repair the relationship with a relatively simple but incredibly powerful procedure called banking time. Okay, well, we're back with Tim and Jennifer, and they've just had another week of some pretty difficult times, a few more explosions that they've described. And what I want to try to do is just spend some time discussing with them the model that we use to sort of understand what's going on with Logan. In the manual, we describe it in a little bit more detail, but this will give you a sense of how these things work and sort of how to explain them to people as well. Because what I'm going to try to do is plug in some of their experiences with Logan to fit some of the experiences that we're going to talk about here. Okay, some will fit more than others. So there's 5 cognitive skill deficits that we're going to talk about. Some will apply just perfectly to Logan, and others not as much. And that's fine. You don't necessarily have to sort of an even distribution of problems. So this sort of gives us a better sense of it. And then we're going to explain to them how we can help them in this arena with a very specific set of procedures to work on. Okay? And then we'll end with giving them an assignment called time banking that we'll quickly introduce to them. And you will see that in the handout. It's a handout that you give to parents, and you really spend a lot of time trying to get parents doing that while you're working on the skill set that we're going to teach them. So let's go ahead and spend a little bit of time talking about some of the, because what goes on in parents' minds is why is he this way, all right? And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to move away from a traditional behavioral model. Now, behavioral therapies focus on consequences, all right? And the idea is that if I can motivate a child with either positive consequences, all right, or negative consequences, punishments, then the behavior will stop. Now, the nice thing about behavioral models is that they work beautifully for problems that are motivational problems. All right? So if it's a motivational problem, there's nothing better than a behavior therapy. So threatening a timeout, threatening to take something away, or taking something away, or spankings can actually work wonderfully. Right? Now, when it's not a motivational problem, then it backfires really badly, as you guys have experienced.
I was going to say that hasn't been working for us.
Right.
Well, it works very well with our other two kids. I mean, they really are relatively easy if we ground them or give them a timeout. It's not a problem.
Right.
But with Logan, they don't work.
They just don't work. So the behavior model doesn't really work that well. This is more of a skills deficit problem. All right. Now, the problem is that when you have skill deficits, there are also motivational deficits that come alongside of it, but they're not the real problem. So, for example, if a child has a reading disability, right, he can't process phonics, he can't learn them that well. Okay. Is he going to want to read?
No.
Not a lot, right? Because reading's not going to be much fun. He's not going to be terribly motivated. Are you going to help him read better by threatening to take away his PlayStation if he doesn't learn how to read better?
No, I guess that wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work well, right? It just looks like a motivational problem when in fact it's a deficits problem. If you want to help him learn how to read, you got to solve the phonics problem or the phonics
So
processing.
are you saying that Logan just doesn't know how to deal with us in a better way? He doesn't know how to do that.
Well, he doesn't know how to deal with negative affect very well.
Like when he feels bad.
Right.
So are you saying it's that in combination of us? You said skills?
Yeah, we're going to teach you a skill set.
Is it our skill set that's off?
Well, the skill set that you have works well for kids who have motivational deficits, motivational problems. You guys know how to get kids motivated to do what they need to do and to teach them what's right and wrong. The difficulties that Logan has is that those don't register.
Okay.
Right? It's not like he doesn't know what's right and wrong, but what happens is that when he starts to get overwhelmed,
Right.
when, to be able to follow a command actually requires some cognitive capacities, which we'll talk about, like impulse control, frustration tolerance, problem-solving skills, and social skills, which we'll talk about. When kids have significant deficits in these arenas, following rules are actually a lot harder than what you think.
So he gets really overwhelmed when I tell him, okay, it's time to go take your shower, turn off the TV.
And I'll explain that to you more. As I go through these cognitive skills, you guys will actually see how that plays, how that explains it.
Okay.
So those are great questions. So let's move into these real quickly. I got a sheet there for each of you that you can look at. And let's just quickly go through some of these. At the top of the list, all right, kids who struggle with some of the problems Logan has, is that they have executive skill deficits. Now, executive skills are rooted in this part of the brain. It's your frontal lobe, right? And it's your ability to problem solve, right? And to problem solve means that you're able to identify what is the problem. You have to be also project what are the consequences and of any solution that I choose. And in some sense, problem solving means that you can emotionally connect with those consequences, that they mean something to you. So you can predict outcomes and make decisions based on what you think those outcomes will be. Now, you guys have already talked about how Logan struggles with this, because you can tell him you're going to take away his PlayStation until the second coming, and he's not terribly motivated by it. Okay, it's not that he doesn't love his PlayStation, because he'll fight anybody on the street for it.
He does love it.
But once he gets upset, that doesn't matter. Now, another part of skills related is cognitive flexibility. Now, cognitive flexibility is your ability to do a couple things. One of them is that you tend to think in shades of gray, right? Kids who have problems with cognitive flexibility think black, white, all, nothing, either or, I win, you lose.
Yeah, he
right?
seems to do that.
Yeah, the world gets divided up in very rigid categories. Now, when kids do this, a couple problems. One, they tend to blow things out of proportion, right? They make mountains out of molehills real quickly. They catastrophize, and that leads to getting angry real quickly. If you see things black, white. You can't problem solve when you can't be flexible either. The other thing that you see with it is that they'll have incredible difficulty shifting from one mindset to the next mindset to the next mindset. And what this leads to are transitional difficulties. All the problems, basically, that you've discussed about Logan occur around transitions. From bedtime,
That's true.
It is very true.
from TV to bedtime, from dinner to TV,
Getting
even
up in the
positive
morning, going to school.
Exactly, coming home from school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, some parents complain that positive transitions, you know, if you're in the middle of the evening and you decide, hey, let's go to Dairy Queen, a lot of kids go, woo! Not these kids. They become a stick in the mud. And a lot of times parents think it's just because they want to be a stick in the mud. It's that they don't make shifts very well.
Right.
So we'll pay more attention to this lack of flexibility and how we can help them with it. The other area, which may be one of the biggest ones, is language processing. Now, language processing is your ability to essentially label your internal states. It's not just what I want, right? Being able to label what you want or what you feel, but why you feel that way, right?
Oh, wow.
And some of the examples that you guys have given about Logan is that he doesn't tell you that very well. Now, when kids have language skill processing difficulties, when they don't have a word for it, they'll use something like a curse word or tell you where to go, all right? And that is a behavior. So instead of using words, they use behaviors. So we want to work at that part in the brain. Now, that part of the brain is really in the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that's going to label stuff, which is really important as the next skill, right? The fourth skill is emotion regulation. Now, emotion regulation has a couple different pieces. One of them has to do with, can he tolerate negative feelings? Logan doesn't do that well. When he gets upset or as he's denied something, he feels like he can't stand it. It's the end of the world. So he can't tolerate frustration very well. The other side about emotion dysregulation is that they tend to be moody and grumpy and irritable, and there's no real cause. So everything can be kind of going his way, but he could still be grumpy and irritable, which is maddening to parents.
Right.
Yeah.
It drives them crazy.
We see that a lot.
Right? It's sort of like, what's wrong? It's nothing make you happy. At one level, you see this. Now, there's a couple different ways of handling that. Some things we can teach you. The other one is that we do talk to parents about the possibility of medication for chronic mood instability. Okay, that's there even when things are going well.
What kind of medication would you need?
There's a number of different types that you could talk to your doctor about. A lot of times, you know, your pediatricians and your family doctors aren't going to be comfortable administering meds. And a child psychiatrist many times will do this. But they'll work with, they won't look at this and shouldn't be looked at as the solution to the problem. Does that make sense? But as one aid, as you are going to work on many other things with him. I mean, you think of it yourself. If your mood's off, your IQ points drop a few points. I mean, even for adults, you can usually see that.
Wow.
So that's one of the things that we'll want to take a look at.
Is he going to need to be on these medications his whole life?
Probably not. Sometimes some folks do, but what we tend to look at it as is that medications are like a cast that holds something in place,
right,
so that the healing can occur at a deeper level. And so it can change from one child to the next. But if this is truly at a biologic level in terms of mood instability, you'll see really nice changes that make it easier to do the stuff that we want to do. Okay? Now, last thing that we'll just touch on real quickly is the fifth cognitive skill is social skills. The ability to start relationships, keep relationships, and to use empathy. All right. Now, let me just make a comment about empathy. Empathy also is a language skill. See, if I can't label my internal states, if I don't know how I feel, then it's really impossible for me to understand how you feel. And empathy requires that I can understand how you feel. And one of the things that I've heard you mention along the way as you talked about Logan is you feel like he can be stingy and selfish and he only cares about him. That's an empathy failure on his part. So as we help him learn how to label what he feels internally, all right, and take that seriously, then you'll also see empathy and understanding for what other people feel come about. Does that sound good?
It sure
Sounds
does.
great.
Sure does.
Now, we're going to do the first thing, though, we got to do is we're going to teach you, we got to get the relationship on a little better ground, okay? And what we're going to use for this is a time banking procedure. And I want you to work on that this week. And what that'll do is it'll give us some emotional regulation, okay? And we have a handout for you about how to do it, goes into detail about how to do it, and I'll explain it to you in just a second. But when we come back together next time, I'm going to talk to you about what can we do to grow cognitive skill deficits I mean, to grow the cognitive skills that he has deficits in right now. Does it sound good?
Sounds
It
great.
does.
All right, so
It
give me a
does.
minute here just to give you a little bit of idea what time banking is. All right. Essentially, every relationship has a bank account, an emotional bank account. All right. And it basically is balanced by input, output. Right. I mean, withdrawals, deposits. Now, every time you get into a discipline interaction with your child, it is a withdrawal. And the normal day-to-day interactions that you have really are the deposits. And usually there's a balance in that ratio, just like a husband-wife relationship. For every positive interaction or negative interaction you have, you also want several positives to offset it.
Yeah, I've heard this theory or this idea with couples, but
Yep.
never thought about it in this light with our children like this.
And it really works for all close relationships. In a sense, that's part of the secure base. Now, what's happened with Logan is because there's been so much uproar, that's gotten imbalanced.
Well, it seems
Right.
like all we do is fight
Right.
with him.
That means that you're getting
Pretty much all the time.
Yeah, so what that means is that your account's getting overdrafted, all right, and it's going bankrupt. So what we're going to try to do is time banking means that you're going to, as the sheets will describe, is you're going to take about 15 minutes apiece, at least 3 to 4 times a week, where you're going to engage Logan by himself
Wow.
in non-directive play.
Now, what do you
Right.
mean by non-directive?
Non-directive means that you're going to ask, what do you want to do? And you're going to follow his lead,
So he gets to do whatever he wants.
whatever he wants to do. And the idea is that you're just basically spending time with him. But some people call it time in, right? Where it's just you following him. Now, when you do this, it's important you not do 2 things. You don't give commands, okay? And you're not going to ask a lot of intrusive questions. The main goal is that you're just enjoying being with him, okay? And that he will begin to enjoy being with you without there being a lot of commands and a lot of demands.
Right.
Now, do we do this together or separately?
Separately.
Separately.
All right, so you want to organize that. The sheet
Wow.
gives you a lot of suggestions about how to do it. Now, one more thing to keep in mind. When you're doing this with him, the key is that basically I tell parents, look, schedule it in a sense. Let him know the days you plan to do it, right? It doesn't reinforce bad behavior, meaning if you tell him you're going to do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, in the evening, if he's having a bad day, you still do it. That's not reinforcing a bad day if you've already told him you're going to do it. Does that make sense? And you never remove it because you've had a bad day. Okay? Those are very important because we don't want this to be a contingent thing.
So we stick with this no matter how he behaves.
Exactly. 9 times out of 10, if you do it, you're going to see incredible changes just in the overall negative emotion, right? And that's going to help us a lot.
I hope so.
But I also tell you, 9 times out of 10, it's very hard for parents to do this. It sounds good on paper, it looks good on paper, but you'll probably find that there's family constraints, time constraints, boundary issues. A lot of things come up for families that make it tough for them to do this. And even though we think we spend a lot of time with our kids in face-to-face interactions, you'll find out you probably don't do as much as you like or you would need. And the sheet spends some time talking to you how to handle the other siblings who are going to want this from you, and you're not going to necessarily have time to do it for all of them.
Right.
Okay?
Thank you so much.
Good luck. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll come back with the 2 of them in the next session and spend some time on how to do collaborative problem-solving skills. Okay, we're back with Tim and Jennifer, and they have both done the special time this week, and though we don't have time to go through all of that with them, they've gotten the desired results in that basically they're noticing that Logan's mood begins to change some. It's stabilized a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And a lot of times parents will feel a little differently toward him, that you can see some things about him that are actually positive that you may have forgotten or maybe not even seen before. But this is something that we require parents actually to do throughout the course of the treatment. In other words, there's not a time where you actually stop doing this. You might crank it down to a couple times a week a piece, but we encourage parents to continue doing this. And I might make a note to you folks there that a lot of times it's not quite this easy, that parents really struggle with doing this, either because of schedules or because of their own relational histories, where they don't have many experiences to draw from of actually having adult interactions that are just one-to-one and that are designed around building intimacy and building closeness. So you have to really work with that, and there's a lot of strategies that we build on for working through resistance with parents. But what we want to do now is move into one of the core pieces of this program, which is building cognitive skills. And what you find is that the therapist can't really build cognitive skills with children, and the reason is that we don't run into the kind of interactions that parents run into. We don't get kids as affectively dysregulated as parents do, because if you're just doing play therapy or just talk therapy with kids, it's not terribly distressing to them, right? Where the distress comes and where they have the primary difficulty is dealing with frustration, right? And therapists just aren't designed to do that. So he can look great in our office. I brought him in my office. He looks wonderful, right? He's not spazzing out that much. Where at home is where you see it. So we have to teach parents how to do these skill sets so that they generalize. And that's been the problems with most treatments for children, is that they work wonderful in the therapist's office. They don't generalize into home or school context. So we have to teach people in other contexts how to do it. All right. So I'm going to quickly show you what this looks like. All right. The model is this. It basically builds on this. We want, in order for Logan's brain to be able to better handle frustration, we've got to work with him in situations that are mild to moderately frustrating. Once it gets too high, you got to shut it down. We'll talk to you about how to do that. Okay. And one of the best places of doing this are in compliance interactions. Right? When you're asking him to do something and he doesn't want to do it.
Right.
Or when he's wanting you to do something that you want to do. Right? Like, give me a Swiss roll right before I go to bed. Right? You might not be willing to do that. This creates emotion. Emotion comes on board, right? And this is where the cognitive skill deficits come in. They come into play now. So we tell parents, when you have a compliance interaction, there's 4 basic goals that we're trying to accomplish, right? The first one is that we want you to take your concerns seriously. Make sense? Second, we want to take a child's concerns seriously. Okay? Third is that we want to prevent meltdowns.
Absolutely.
Now, meltdowns are actually our #1 target right now because they blow him out of the water and you out of the water. Okay? So meltdowns we want to eliminate. We have a way of doing that. You've noticed some of that this week.
Yeah, he's better.
So we want to prevent meltdowns. They're not good. I'll tell parents usually meltdowns are bad for a number of reasons. One of them is that they create really negative beliefs about themselves and others when they're really angry. Second is it prevents your child from learning how to do the cognitive skill set. And there's some evidence that when children get really angry and really overwhelmed, there's actually neurochemical and actual neurological damage that starts to occur. In other words, the brain is not working the way we want to, and the linkages that we're trying to create stop linking. All right, and then one of the last things is what we want to work on the cognitive skills. Right, so take his concerns, your concerns seriously, prevent meltdowns, and work on cognitive skills. Now, we add a 5th one, which is that we want to create secure base use. We want your child to believe that you can help him. We know you can help him, but we want him to believe it. Okay? So we want how do we do that? Okay. We tell parents, look, and this comes out of the collaborative problem-solving skills model. Okay? Now, what this is essentially thinking of it, when you have a conflict with your child, you've got one of 3 options. Okay? We call these 3 different pathways. Pathway A is the pathway that you guys have been taking up to this point, which means it's basically adult concern only. What I say is what you're going to do, and you're going to make it happen no matter what. Right. All right? So I said, shower it is. Does that make sense? So you're going to push it through. In light of the 4 goals, you got to ask yourself, you're taking your concern seriously, so you get goal number 1. Are you taking his concern seriously? No.
I'm not even sure what his concern is.
Which is a great point, right? That's a language skills thing. 2, you're not preventing meltdowns.
Right.
Are you working on cognitive skills? No. All right, so the next thing is you've got pathway C. The other extreme is that you drop the expectation at that point in time. Does that make sense? Now, there's different ways of dropping expectations. One of them, of course, is to realize, like for example, with the bedtime routine, you guys knew that you were going to push it to try to get him to go to bed right now and make a rapid transition in the evenings. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And to demand it at that point in time is what, in one way, kept escalating to a meltdown. There's sometimes when you can table it and drop the expectation for the sake of preventing a meltdown. It doesn't mean that you permanently drop the expectation. You'll put it back on the table, but at a time when it's better. All right? That's one way of doing it. Another way that we teach parents is that you can drop an expectation, but it's only because you're working on other goals. You can't work on all goals at the same time. Like being able to transition to bedtime may be one of the goals that we'll work on, but that doesn't mean that we can work on all the other areas where he struggles. For example, when he comes home from school, or when it comes time to do homework, or dealing with siblings. We'll get to those, but usually we can only work on one at a time, and you have to set some of the other expectations aside temporarily. That's tough, because we tend, as parents, when our kids don't have multiple problems, we feel like we're doing lots of goals at one time. In this case, we got to minimize them some. Now, your third choice is going to be potentially B. And B is where we're going to work on the cognitive skills. All right? And there's a skill set that comes with using B. Okay? And we outline that in the manual for you. And we're going to do lots of practice on using B. But B has 5 skills. All right? We call them EARIC. The first 3, EAR, ear, okay, are the most important. This is what they are. First, E is empathy. Empathy is getting his concerns out on the table, right? So if you're saying, well, obviously you don't want to go to bed. I mean, you don't want to go take a shower. What's the deal with that? Why not? Because I'm watching my show and I don't want, right? And by the way, when you do B right in the heat of the moment, that's an emergency B. Emergency Bs don't work as well as one that's done preventatively, which is potentially at a time when he's not in such a bad mood, saying, Logan, I noticed that this bedtime thing is a real pain. It's very difficult for you. Tell me what your concern is. Does that make sense?
Sure does.
And helping him learn how to put words to that and label that will be crucial. All right? It's also, the second piece is you putting your concern out on the table. Right? My concern is,
You really need to take a shower.
and why is that
Get
so?
clean.
Why is that so important? Why, in other words, your concern, taking a shower, I would say, is actually a solution. Your concern is that he needs to be clean, and why is clean so important? Well, you might stink. Other kids can really, there's a lot of things, and you can get sick. There's a lot of things that can come with that. So now at this point, you've set the table, okay, to do problem solving. Now the R is most important because it means that you're going to be respectful, even when he's being a stinker, okay? And we go into a lot about being non-contingent in your respect, meaning if he's being a stinker, you still got to be respectful. We encourage parents never to use disrespect as a form of punishment because A, it doesn't work, and B, it's a bad model for your kids.
Right.
All right. Once you set the table with that, then you can move into the collaboration, the true collaboration. You want to be you don't want to take showers in the evening, okay, and you don't like the way they feel. That may be what he'll actually tell you. It'll be interesting to see what it is. But my concern is that you got to be clean, all right? I, in the model, means that you're going to invite him to collaborate, which is, so Logan, what do you say we do about it? How do we handle that? Now, he might go, that I never take showers. This is where collaboration comes in, right? Well, that makes sense, and that meets your concern, but it doesn't do much for mine, right? I mean, it does really do a lot for yours, but not a lot for mine.
Right.
So you got any other ideas, right? Have him work at this a little bit. Now, he may not come up with any, but he might surprise you, okay? And we have lots of examples of how kids do this. It's wonderful. But sometimes you have to, you have to propose some. But remember, don't become overcommitted to your solutions. Throw them out as possibilities, right? You're going to collaborate with them on it, all right? And see, at this point, you're working on all the cognitive skills. When you use empathy, that's mood regulation. When you use empathy, it's labeling cognitive skills, right? When you assert your concerns, right, you're working at empathy, helping him understand what you're thinking and feeling and taking it seriously. Cognitive flexibility, right? Social skills, modeling respect, all those skills get put in place. And then the problem solving, when you invite him into it and he says, oh, hey, I just won't take a bath again. It sounds great. Well, that's great, but what's going to happen if you don't take a bath? Well, nobody's ever going to talk to you and you're going to smell bad, and that's not cutting it. All right. We will do this literally hundreds of times with hundreds of examples, right? And you'll learn how to do this better and better. And we have a sheet on compliance interactions that you'll fill out, just one a week, and we'll go through it, where you're going to label what happened, what you said, what he said, and what was the outcome. What we're looking for is you using the skill set here. Does that make sense? All the skills are labeled right here in the bottom of this sheet. But you also see that you got the 3 pathways here. Because parents many times try to force an A, right? And that'll get in trouble. You're more likely to go down the A pathway, whereas you're more likely to go down the C.
Right.
All right. As we always tell parents, usually on the front end, using more C's is better. A's are never good because they always lead to meltdowns, almost always. All right. And C's can kind of and use B's just for a couple of them, right? Work on the B's. That's sort of the very basics of how this model works. What it does is it begins to help your child see and learn how to deal with conflict in a completely different way, all right? And there's some behavioral things that we'll do. For example, if you don't problem solve with me about this right now, you can't watch TV until we get it finished. Does that make sense? But as soon as we're done talking, then you can go do that. Notice it's not permanent,
Right.
and the ball's in his court. So we'll talk about a number of different ways of doing that.
It's a lot of give and take.
There is. But let me ask you this. The interaction that we just talked about in that one, have you lost any power?
No.
I
No.
don't feel that we have as parents at all.
No, when you do the collaboration, you're not losing any power. Parents are afraid they will, but you're not going to lose power on this. You're actually going to gain it in the long run. Okay?
Thanks again.
Well, that wraps this up for this section and just for this film, and hopefully it just gives you a little bit of flavor about how this model's done. It takes some time to learn how to do it. We have some different resources that are in your manual that you can draw from, some that are from our own experience and from my own clinic, and some of them that are out there in the literature. And there's some wonderful authors and some wonderful programs out there that you can draw from to learn more about how to use this model effectively with kids who are angry, defiant, and explosive.